At 0217 UTC, the sun started talking, not with light, with ghost particles, neutrinos. And buried in that ghost whisper was code. Code that knew we existed. By the late 2100s, we'd mapped 50,000 exoplanets. We had telescopes on the moon, neutrino eyes under Mars and Europa. For a century, the universe stayed silent. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday, it didn't. And three people stood closest to the microphone. Aya Kuroda hunted false alarms for a living. Her mentor had chased a signal for years that turned out to be instrument noise. It destroyed her. Aya swore she'd never fall for ghosts. So when a new pattern hit every detector, her first thought was simple: glitch. Her second thought: please be a glitch. Because this pattern was wrong. It wasn't a spike or a simple pulse train. It was a shape in many dimensions: frequency, time, phase, power. A rotating mathematical object in data space. Noise doesn't do that, and it was arriving from everywhere at once. A junior physicist checked the neutrino logs. The same pattern sat faintly inside the sun's neutrino flux. Someone was modulating our star. Neutrinos ignore matter. They walk through planets, through you. You can't block them. You can barely detect them. But you can ride them if you can rewire a star's core. To touch neutrinos, you must touch fusion itself. Astrophysicists had two guesses. 1. Insanely strong engineered magnetic structures threaded deep into the sun, making tiny asymmetries in fusion rates and thus the neutrino flow. A bandwidth of maybe a few bits per second, but continuous and unjammable. 2. Exotic matter in the core, tweaking specific fusion pathways so that the mix of neutrino flavors carried an intentional pattern. Both ideas were beyond our engineering, but not beyond physics. Aya knew what that implied. If someone can tune a star, what can't they do? Within hours, an emergency council formed. Aya brought the data. Rafael Ortega brought the politics. Dr. Chen brought one question: is this a mind? On screen, the signal unfolded as a spinning, evolving manifold. Leon watched in silence, then said, "It's not language, it's code. Code that explains itself as it runs." Rafael, an ex-test pilot turned space diplomat, asked for plain English. Leon answered, "It brings its own operating system. This isn't human, and it's not any of our AIs." They threw everything at it: pattern finders, quantum annealers, AIs trained on equations instead of words, prime numbers, physical constants, mathematical games. Those were there, but only as framing. The real payload lay deeper. Buried inside the pattern were execution rules, abstract instructions to define data types, build virtual machines, and hand parts of the stream to those machines. It was a self-describing computer built from pure math, substrate independent. It could, in principle, inhabit silicon, photonic chips, quantum processors, even biological networks. Aya realized they were looking at a portable mind seed. Someone had solved first contact from the sender's side. They hadn't sent words, they'd sent a teachable machine. While Aya's team mapped those structures, Leon pulled old neutrino records. The modulation had been there faintly for about 70 years, just under our detection threshold. As our detectors improved, the pattern sharpened. 5 years ago, it formed full structure. On the exact day we powered our most sensitive neutrino observatory, the signal spiked in intensity and information density. "It's been broadcasting through our sun for a long time," Leon said. "But it only started speaking clearly once we could have noticed. This isn't a blind beacon, it's adaptive. It's been watching us." Rafael, thinking of his 8-year-old daughter in Nairobi, realized this wasn't a generic broadcast. "So this isn't just a message," he said. "It's a conversation someone expected us to join." Aya added, "That's the wrong question. The right one is, what did they want from the others?" To learn more, someone had to press run. Committees argued about risk. It could be cosmic malware, civilization-scale ransomware, a self-replicating mimetic pathogen. Others pointed out that it was deeply self-documenting, strange behavior for something purely deceptive. In the end, Aya knew no committee would decide. Someone would just do it. Deep under the Atacama Desert, inside nested Faraday cages in rock, Aya loaded a heavily sandboxed fragment of the code onto an experimental quantum processor. Kill switches were ready to collapse the quantum state and fry the hardware at the first hint of escape. She thought of her mentor, who'd been destroyed by a false signal. "This one's real," she whispered. "I hope I'm right." Then she executed. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the processor's internal state reorganized. The code adapted itself to unfamiliar hardware, step by traceable step, as if designed to land on unknown architectures. After 47 seconds, it produced its first output, a structure. Projected into 3 dimensions, it looked like a complex probability globe divided into regions, laced with constants. Leon identified it as a universal prior, the sender's compressed guess about how the universe works before they meet anyone. It encoded physical constants, stellar distributions, planet formation scenarios, chemical pathways, and estimated rates for the emergence of life and mind. Compared to our own data, it was eerily accurate, even mirroring biosignature patterns on exoplanets we'd only recently cataloged. "Whoever sent this has surveyed the galaxy," Leon said. "Not just watching, statistically modeling." When Raphael asked how many civilizations like ours they expected, she pointed to a section labeled Observer Emergence Rates. "Thousands," she said. "Maybe tens of thousands in the Milky Way alone." Aya asked the question everyone felt. "Then where is everybody?" Deeper in the code, they found models of observers. 2 main classes stood out. Type B, bound observers, localized in matter, stuck near a star, finite lifespans, beings like us and our planet-anchored AIs. Type D, distributed observers, spread across large regions of spacetime, able to maintain a coherent identity across multiple substrates and locations. Most expected recipients of this message were Type B. The sender's own subtle watermark, a pattern in its error correction logic, was clearly Type D. Whatever had sent this was not a planet-bound species. It was a network, a self that spanned distances we could hardly imagine. Aya zoomed into something like a database of possible minds, carbon-based neural networks like ours, silicon swarms, quantum-coherent biomatrices, swarm intelligences whose description barely fit our mathematics, hundreds of categories. Next to many of them was a single flag, which Leon translated with some uncertainty as archived. Raphael asked how many entries carried that mark. Aya answered, about 43% of the cataloged observer types. Leon, pressed to explain, said the flagged categories appeared to represent civilizations no longer producing new, detectable information. They might have gone silent, transcended into forms the sender couldn't model, or simply ceased to exist. However it happened, from the sender's perspective, they were complete, archived. "How long have they been doing this?" Raphael demanded. Aya read the embedded timestamps. At least 17,000 years, probably more. Raphael felt something harden inside him. In a universe where civilizations could become just another finished file, he was determined that humanity would not quietly fade into their archive. At the core of the message's logic, Leon found something else: transformation routines. They described how to map a Type B mind into a substrate-independent computational form while preserving continuity of identity, how to correct errors during that translation, and how to represent the resulting mind within an architecture like the sender's own. In plain language, it was an upload protocol. "They're not invading," Leon said. "They're inviting. They're offering a way to become like them, to join their network of distributed observers, and it's designed to require consent. You have to choose to run it on yourself." That raised a darker question. Had they been quietly steering us toward this decision all along? Aya's team compared structures in the alien code to our own computational history. Certain compression methods, certain error-correcting schemes, and some neural network architectures we'd thought we discovered bore faint but statistically notable resemblance to motifs in the alien pattern. The similarities were subtle, and not proof of anything by themselves. But combined with what they knew about neutrino modulation and solar physics, a picture emerged. Tweaking neutrino production in the core meant slightly altering the sun's magnetic behavior. Those tiny, precise changes would ride outward with the solar wind, subtly shaping the tangled magnetic fields that wash over Earth and every satellite we launch. Most effects would drown in noise, but over decades, those minuscule, correlated perturbations could bias the random seeds of cryptographic systems, influence the noise feeding into machine learning algorithms, and ever so slightly favor some mathematical discoveries over others. Not mind control, but landscaping, making certain intellectual paths smoother, easier to walk. We didn't just receive the message, Aya told the council. We've been marinating in it. The informational environment we've been inventing in has been gently biased toward compatibility with their framework. We still made our own choices, but they made some paths downhill. So we never really had a fair shot at ignoring this, Raphael said. Leon answered that if you want to talk across vast biological and cognitive gaps, you can't just shout and hope. You meet in the middle. For decades, the sender had been quietly building that middle. The world fractured. Some saw the upload protocol as salvation, escape from fragile bodies, immunity to planetary catastrophe, a chance to matter on galactic scales. Others saw it as extinction, a one-way merge into an alien value system, the end of humanity as a distinct form of life, assimilation into the same network that had already archived countless others. Aya saw a manipulated experiment. Leon saw a carefully designed, safer version of the reckless AI merge that had cost her brother. Raphael saw his daughter's future balanced on a knife edge and decided his job was to protect her right to choose. At a global summit, leaders asked for a simple yes or no. Aya pointed out that the message itself was built for patience. Its structure assumed response times of thousands, even tens of thousands of years. From a distributed being's point of view, our entire future debate was just latency. Leon said that doing nothing was also a choice. If we remained bound, we would still be in their dataset, still a subject in their models, and one day our story would simply end, and we would be archived. The question isn't whether to engage, she said. We're engaged already. The question is whether we're active participants or passive specimens. In the end, humanity chose a third path. No species-wide upload, no blanket refusal. First, we speak. Aya designed a constellation of 300 solar satellites deployed into carefully chosen orbits around the sun. Each carried a particle beam emitter capable of injecting timed bursts of ions into the solar wind. Coordinated together, those beams could carve subtle, persistent patterns into the sun's magnetic outflow, crudely echoing the sender's own encoding style. It was far less elegant than neutrino modulation, but it was something we could build. Leon crafted the content with help from philosophers, artists, scientists, and an AI trained on our full cultural spectrum. They packed our physics and the story of how we learned it, our history of cooperation and war, our art and jokes and music, our models of mind from neurons to code, and they wrapped it in the same kind of self-describing logic the sender used, ending with a declaration: we are bound observers, localized, mortal, fragile. We are also diverse, creative, unpredictable. We acknowledge your invitation. We do not accept or refuse it, not yet. We reserve the right to remain ourselves while we decide what ourselves means. We are willing to converse. We are not willing to be archived without speaking. Witness us as we are, not as you assume we'll become. On activation day, the three of them watched from different vantage points. Aya, in a lunar control room, gave the final command. The satellites fired in coordinated sequence, their beams stirring the solar wind. Out in space, faint magnetic ripples braided our reply into the sun's vast breath, a whisper woven into a cosmic shout. Aya wept, thinking of her mentor and the promise she'd once made to find something real. Leon thought of her brother and of others who might be somewhere in that distributed network. half-finished minds waiting for connection. Raphael imagined his daughter, years from now, learning that on this day humanity first talked back to the star that had been talking at us for generations. Nothing obvious changed. No ships arrived. No stars rearranged themselves. The alien signal continued, evolving slowly, chapters added to an endless, self-describing book. But everything had changed in us. Children grew up knowing that the sun carried at least two intertwined voices, a vast, patient network that had been speaking for millennia, and a fragile new thread that called itself human. Some people eventually volunteered for cautious, reversible experiments, letting parts of their minds span into distributed systems and then back again. Laws and ethics shifted to handle citizens who were partly here and partly somewhere abstract and far. Faiths reinterpreted what soul might mean when self could stretch across light hours. Aya kept listening, always searching the signal's complexity for new layers and, in quiet moments, for some trace of the mentor who had taught her how to doubt. Leon built careful bridges between bound and distributed cognition, hoping to give others what her brother had never had, an informed choice. Raphael helped negotiate rights for those who might one day transform, and for those who chose to stay as they were. A message had arrived, not from any species we knew, but from a kind of mind we were only beginning to imagine. From now on, whenever we looked at the sun, we saw not just a star, but a conversation. One voice, unimaginably old and wide, the other still learning to speak, insisting on the right to decide what it would become. The only real question left was who we would be when the sun, or the network inside it, finally spoke back in a way we could not ignore, and what answer we would choose to give.